She was on her way to catch a flight, dressed sharp, carrying her briefcase, just another morning at the airport. Then 2 officers stopped her, claimed she was flagged, and led her down a quiet hallway. Minutes later, they slapped on handcuffs, planted evidence, and demanded thousands in cash. In less than 10 minutes, their arrogance crumbled into panic, and suddenly they were the ones begging for mercy. Want to know how a routine trip became a courtroom battle that shook an entire department? Sit back, like this video, and subscribe for more stories just as gripping. Camille Harris had just made it past the ticket counter and was heading toward the TSA checkpoint at Salt Lake City International Airport. It was a little past 8 a.m., and the airport was already busy with travelers rushing to catch early morning flights. Camille, dressed in a charcoal gray business suit and carrying a slim leather briefcase, looked every bit the professional she was. A federal public defender traveling to Denver for a major criminal justice reform conference. Her flight was in less than an hour. She had checked in early, cleared her bags, and was ready to board with time to spare. Or so she thought. As she neared the security lane, 2 airport police officers stepped directly into her path. One was tall, broad-shouldered, and had a buzz cut. The other was leaner, slightly younger, with pale blue eyes that didn't blink much. The taller one spoke first. "Ma'am, step aside for a moment. We need to speak with you." Camille paused, caught off guard. "Is something wrong?" "Just routine," the younger officer said flatly. "We need to verify something. Please follow us." Without raising their voices, the 2 officers walked her toward a side hallway that branched off from the main checkpoint area. Camille glanced back at the line of passengers slowly moving through TSA screening. Her instincts told her this wasn't routine. Once they turned the corner, the tall officer pulled out a tablet and tapped a few times. "According to our system, you've been flagged for additional inspection. Possible links to a financial operation under federal watch. Any idea why?" Camille blinked. "No, that has to be a mistake." The younger officer stared at her, unsmiling. "We'll sort it out. But for now, you'll need to come with us. Don't worry, it's probably just a system glitch." Camille's heart pounded faster. She kept her tone calm. "I'm a federal attorney. Can I at least call my office?" "Not yet," the tall officer said quickly. "You'll have a chance to explain everything. Later." Then he added, "This way, ma'am." And just like that, her ordinary business trip turned into something else entirely. They led Camille through a plain, white hallway with no windows. The buzz of airport activity faded behind them. Her heels clicked against the tile floor, echoing louder than usual. Neither officer spoke. The tall one walked just ahead of her, while the younger one followed close behind. She glanced at the exit sign above a heavy door they passed. She was trying to memorize details now, just in case. They turned one more corner and suddenly stepped into a more open area near a back service corridor. What happened next hit her like a slap. "Stop right there," the taller officer said sharply. Camille halted, startled. "What is this?" "Hands where we can see them," the younger officer barked. People nearby, mostly airline staff and a few passengers headed toward a connecting gate, started to turn and look. Confused faces, whispering. One man even pulled out his phone. "Wait, what is going on?" Camille asked, holding her briefcase tightly. "You're being detained," the older officer replied as he grabbed her arm and took the case from her hand. "You've been flagged for potential financial crimes linked to organized activity. We're not taking any chances." Camille's mouth went dry. "This is a mistake. I told you I'm a federal public defender. I can—" "Turn around!" the officer cut her off. "Now!" Camille felt her heart drop as she turned slowly, still trying to stay calm. She heard the metallic click of the handcuffs before she felt them tighten around her wrists. Her shoulders stiffened from both shock and shame. People nearby began whispering louder. A TSA worker stared from behind a desk. A little girl clutching her backpack looked up at her mother and asked, "Is that lady in trouble?" The mother pulled the girl close and said something in a low voice. Camille kept her chin up, but inside, everything twisted. Her breath shortened, her mind raced. This was more than a misunderstanding. This was public humiliation. They were treating her like a criminal, like she was dangerous. The officers didn't say another word. One walked beside her, the other just behind, steering her toward a set of unmarked doors. The hallway seemed longer now, colder. Camille walked forward in silence, her hands bound, her dignity bruised, and her professional identity suddenly invisible. The officers guided Camille into a small, windowless security room at the far end of the corridor. The walls were off-white, the air cold and dry, and the only furniture inside was a metal table, 3 plastic chairs, and a surveillance camera mounted in the corner. The door closed with a loud thud, and the sound echoed slightly in the quiet space. The taller officer, who had introduced himself earlier as Officer Thompson, gestured for Camille to sit down. She did, carefully, with her cuffed hands behind her back, making it awkward to move. The younger officer, Green, stood by the door, arms crossed, eyes fixed on her. Thompson leaned forward and set Camille's briefcase on the table. "Let's start with your bag." "I'd like to speak to an attorney," Camille said, steadying her voice. Thompson ignored her. He unzipped the case and slowly began removing its contents. A laptop, a folder of legal notes, her planner, then something she didn't recognize. "What is that?" she asked, eyes narrowing. Thompson pulled out a small manila envelope that had been buried underneath her paperwork. He opened it and dumped the contents onto the table. A stack of neatly bundled $100 bills and a black USB flash drive clattered against the metal. Camille's stomach dropped. "That is not mine," she said immediately. "I've never seen that before." Green gave a low whistle from the door. "Interesting," he said. "Pretty strange for someone who claims to be on a routine business trip," Thompson said, pretending to sound curious. Camille's eyes narrowed. That was planted. "Ma'am," Thompson said, raising an eyebrow, "you're in a serious situation. That flash drive, if it contains what we think it does, plus the cash, could link you to federal-level criminal activity. Bank fraud, wire transfers, possible offshore transactions." "This is absurd," she said. "I'm a federal defender. This is my official work trip. You're framing me." "We don't make accusations," Green cut in. "We just follow the leads." There was a long pause. Then Thompson leaned in slightly. His voice dropped. "Of course, things don't have to get complicated. There's another way we can handle this." Camille's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "Look," Thompson said, now speaking in a softer tone, almost casual. "Sometimes the system flags the wrong person. It happens. Could be a glitch, or maybe someone typed in the wrong name. But once you're in the system, it's hard to shake it. Homeland Security, the FBI, they don't forget names easily." Green moved closer, arms still crossed. "Your file gets passed around. Investigators dig deep. Travel records, phone logs, emails. One mistake, even if you're innocent, can ruin a career." Camille said nothing. She knew the tactic. Build fear, create pressure. Thompson sat back and crossed his arms. "But like I said, there's a way to avoid all that." Camille locked eyes with him. "You give us a little something," he continued. "Call it an administrative correction fee. Say, $7,500. We file the report as a false alert. You leave today. No flags, no delays, no official record." Green added, "No one ever has to know. Not your office, not the DOJ, not the conference in Denver." Camille sat still, her back straight, the cuffs biting into her wrists. She knew now this was never about a system error. This was a setup, a scam, a well-practiced con hidden behind badges, and they had picked the wrong woman. Camille didn't respond right away. She stayed quiet, studying both men carefully. Thompson was confident, even smug, as if he had done this a dozen times before. Green, quieter, but just as dangerous, kept his eyes locked on her, waiting to see if fear would crack her calm. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. After a few long seconds, Camille tilted her head slightly and asked in a low, flat voice, "Could you repeat your names and badge numbers, please?" Thompson blinked. "What?" "Your names and badge numbers," she repeated. "I want to make sure I remember them correctly." Green let out a short, dry laugh. "That won't help you now." "Humor me," she said. Thompson exhaled slowly and leaned forward again. "Fine. Officer Rick Thompson, badge 4271. And he's Officer Matt Green, badge 3106. You got all that?" "Perfect," Camille said. Her voice clipped. She shifted slightly in her seat, straightened her shoulders, then spoke with a tone so calm and clear it cut through the room like glass. "My name is Camille Harris. I'm a federal public defender for the Northern District of Georgia, appointed by the United States Court. I specialize in cases involving violations of constitutional rights and abuse of authority under color of law." Thompson's smirk dropped. Green stopped leaning against the wall. Camille continued, "You have just attempted to extort a federal officer. You planted false evidence. You threatened me with federal charges. And everything, every single word has been recorded." She nodded toward her lapel. "I activated my voice recorder the moment you pulled me aside at the security checkpoint. It's been running this entire time, and yes, under Georgia law, as long as I'm a party to the conversation, that recording is completely legal." The silence in the room was instant and heavy. Thompson's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Green shifted his weight, glancing nervously at the door, then back at Camille. "Now," she said, locking eyes with Thompson, "you are going to place my bag on the table. Then you're going to remove these cuffs. After that, I'm going to use my phone to contact my supervisor at the Department of Justice, and then the FBI field office here in Salt Lake City." "Wait," Thompson stammered. "Hold on. Maybe we got off on the wrong—" "No," Camille cut him off. "You got greedy. You picked the wrong target." Green stepped forward slowly, reached for her bag, and set it gently on the table. His hands trembled slightly. Thompson, still pale, reached behind her and fumbled with the cuffs until they snapped open. Camille rubbed her wrists, then unzipped the side pocket of her bag, pulled out her phone, and began dialing. The two officers stood frozen, no longer in control. They had gone from predators to prey in less than 5 minutes. And they knew it. Camille stood as she made her calls, her voice clear, steady, and focused. She first contacted her direct supervisor at the Federal Public Defender's Office in Atlanta, providing the exact location, names, and badge numbers of the two officers, along with a summary of what had just occurred. Then she called the Salt Lake City FBI field office, asking for the special agent in charge of airport-related investigations. Her final call was to the airport's chief of security. She spoke quickly but calmly, including every relevant detail: her initial stop at the checkpoint, the planted evidence, the extortion demand, and the active recording. She finished each call with the same sentence: "I am requesting immediate intervention. These officers have committed a serious criminal offense under federal law." She had barely ended the last call when she heard movement outside the room. 10 minutes later, the door burst open. The first man to enter was wearing a suit. Dark gray, sharp cut, and with a Department of Justice badge clipped to his belt. His face was tense, his steps swift. Behind him came 2 uniformed officers from airport security and a tall, calm-looking woman in a navy blue FBI jacket. The room suddenly felt small. "Camille Harris?" the man in the suit asked. She nodded. "Yes, federal public defender. Everything has been recorded. Evidence is on my person, including the audio and photos I took of the scene." The man turned to Thompson and Green. "Officers, set your weapons, radios, and badges on the table, now." Thompson didn't move. "I said now," the man repeated, his voice firm. Green reacted first, slowly pulling the items from his belt and placing them on the table, his face pale. Thompson followed, reluctantly, his mouth tight, eyes darting towards the floor. "Effective immediately," the man said. "You are both suspended from duty pending a full federal investigation. Do not attempt to leave this facility. Internal Affairs and DOJ investigators will be arriving shortly." The FBI agent moved to stand between the two officers. Neither spoke. The airport's chief of security stepped in next, addressing Camille with visible regret. "Miss Harris, on behalf of the Salt Lake City Airport Police Department, I want to extend my deepest apologies for what you've experienced today. What happened here was inexcusable." Another officer gently returned Camille's briefcase to her, along with a printed property log confirming the items recovered. Her voice recorder, still running, was paused and sealed in an evidence bag by the DOJ official. Thompson suddenly spoke, voice shaky. We didn't know who she was. It wasn't personal. We made a mistake." Camille looked at him directly, her eyes unwavering. "It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern, and I'm going to make sure the pattern ends here." Green tried to say something too, but the FBI agent raised a hand. "Save it. You'll have plenty of time to explain yourself. Under oath." The room emptied quickly after that. Thompson and Green were escorted out through a separate door, their posture no longer upright and confident, but sunken and defeated. Camille stood quietly, her phone back in her hand, watching them go. There was no satisfaction in her eyes, only resolve. Justice had just taken its first step. The investigation began within hours. While Camille was escorted to a private lounge to rest and debrief with DOJ officials, a joint task force from the FBI and the airport's Internal Affairs Division got to work. They moved quickly, reviewing surveillance footage, collecting officer patrol logs, and locking down the security room where the incident had taken place. First, they pulled video from the security cameras throughout the terminal. The footage clearly showed Thompson and Green approaching Camille at the checkpoint, escorting her through multiple areas without a proper explanation, and ultimately placing her in handcuffs without cause. The walk through the crowded hallway was captured from multiple angles, showing Camille being led away like a criminal, her posture straight, her eyes forward, while travelers stared or whispered. Inside the security room, while there was no camera due to privacy policies, the hallway footage just outside confirmed timestamps and matched the timeline Camille had provided. More importantly, Camille's voice recording was transferred to a DOJ computer system and reviewed in full. Every word from the moment she was detained to the offer of a correction fee was on tape, clear, undeniable, and deeply troubling. Investigators also checked the officers' radio logs and patrol records. There were no official reports filed about Camille, no suspicious activity alerts, nothing to justify the stop. That alone raised major red flags. But it didn't stop there. Camille's case triggered a deeper audit of Thompson and Green's history. Complaints from other travelers, many of them people of color, had been quietly dismissed over the past year. A few flagged incomplete investigations resurfaced. The team began reaching out to possible victims, asking if they were ever pulled aside by airport police under unclear circumstances. And slowly, a pattern emerged. It became clear that this wasn't just about Camille. It was bigger. The signs had been there. It had just taken someone with legal knowledge, confidence, and the courage to push back to bring the entire thing to light. As Camille sat quietly in the lounge, sipping water and answering questions from a DOJ representative, she knew this was far from over. But the truth was moving. And now, it wasn't just her story anymore. As the investigation continued, more disturbing details came to light. Over the next 2 weeks, the joint team from the FBI and the Department of Justice uncovered a trail of misconduct that stretched far beyond Camille's case. They found that Thompson and Green had used similar tactics before, stopping passengers under vague pretenses, isolating them, and pressuring them with threats of federal charges. In most cases, the victims had been people of color, Black, Latino, or Asian travelers who were either flying alone or had international connections. Some were U.S. citizens. Others were foreign nationals visiting family or attending school. Many didn't fully understand their legal rights. Some barely spoke English. And nearly all of them had one thing in common. They were terrified. Out of fear and confusion, many had agreed to pay what the officers called fast-track processing fees, or expedited clearance fines. The payments were usually between $2,000 and $6,000, often made through cash withdrawals from nearby ATMs or mobile transfers. One woman, a graduate student from Nigeria, had emptied her tuition savings to pay $3,500 after being told her visa might be revoked. By the end of the review, investigators confirmed at least 9 victims had fallen into the trap. Some had been too ashamed to report it. Others said they didn't want to cause problems or attract attention. But once they learned what happened to Camille and saw that someone had stood up and taken action, they felt empowered to speak. The total amount taken by Thompson and Green over the past year? Just over $42,000, all undocumented, unreported, and collected through fear. Camille was kept in the loop. She received regular updates from the DOJ team handling the case. Each new victim they uncovered only strengthened the charges. It was no longer a matter of misconduct. It was now a clear pattern of extortion, racial targeting, and abuse of power under color of law. For Camille, the news was heartbreaking, but not surprising. She had spent years defending people who had been silenced or mistreated by authority figures. What shocked her wasn't that it had happened, but how many people had felt too powerless to come forward. Now, with solid evidence, multiple witness statements, and Camille's own detailed testimony and recording, federal prosecutors were ready to move forward. They weren't just building a case. They were about to make an example. The courtroom was full on the morning of the trial. Reporters lined the benches, law students sat shoulder to shoulder taking notes, and members of the public, many from local civil rights groups, watched silently. The case of United States v. Rick Thompson and Matt Green had become more than a legal battle. It was now a symbol of something larger, a demand for accountability. Thompson and Green sat at the defense table, both dressed in dark suits instead of their former uniforms. Their expressions were tight, their shoulders tense. Gone was the confidence they had shown inside the airport. Now, they looked like two men waiting for a verdict they already feared. The prosecution didn't need theatrics. The facts spoke loudly. They presented Camille's voice recording, complete and clear. The officer's exact words, how they asked for $7,500 to make the report go away, rang through the courtroom like a warning siren. They showed surveillance footage of Camille being led through the airport in handcuffs. They introduced statements from all 9 victims who had come forward, some through video depositions, others in person. But it was Camille's testimony that changed the entire mood in the courtroom. She stood at the witness stand in a simple navy blue dress and spoke with calm determination. She walked the jury through every step of that morning, from the moment she was pulled aside to the discovery of the planted envelope, to the officer's smug attempt to extort her behind a closed door. When she spoke of the little girl watching as she was led away in handcuffs, people in the courtroom shifted in their seats. When she recounted how one officer sneered, "Your career could be over if we send your name to Homeland," jaws clenched across the gallery. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her words were measured and factual, but the emotion underneath them was raw and real. By the time she finished, the courtroom was silent. A few jurors had watery eyes. One man wiped his glasses twice. The defense tried to argue that the officers were under pressure, that they had misjudged the situation, that Camille had overreacted, but their arguments fell flat. There was no excuse for planted evidence, no excuse for demanding cash, and no way to spin the voices on that recording. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, When they returned, the foreperson stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Camille didn't smile. She simply nodded. The courtroom remained still for a beat longer before the judge thanked the jury and adjourned. Justice had spoken, loud and clear. A month after the verdict, Camille Harris stood outside her office building in Atlanta, watching the morning sun rise over the city skyline. The trial was over. The sentence had been handed down, 7 years in federal prison for both Rick Thompson and Matt Green. The judge called it a calculated and shameful abuse of authority, and made clear that their actions not only harmed individuals, but damaged the trust the public places in law enforcement. Camille had taken a short leave of absence after the trial, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she needed time to breathe, to reflect, and to heal. What had started as a normal work trip had turned into a legal battle, a national headline, and a deeply personal experience that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Now, back at work, Camille felt different, but not broken, stronger, sharper, more resolved. She didn't seek attention. She didn't give long interviews or write op-eds, but within the legal community, her story traveled fast. She became a quiet inspiration to younger attorneys, especially women and people of color, who saw in her the example of someone who stood her ground and used the law, not just to defend others, but to defend herself. Soon after returning, Camille was asked to lead a new task force focused on identifying patterns of abuse and misconduct in federally controlled spaces like airports, federal buildings, and immigration facilities. She accepted without hesitation. Her work took on a deeper meaning now. She wasn't just handling cases. She was shaping change. She began training public defenders across the country on how to recognize signs of abuse of authority, how to educate clients about their rights, and how to advocate more effectively when those rights were violated. The Salt Lake City Airport Police Department also underwent serious reform. New policies were introduced, including stricter officer oversight, random audio audits, and improved complaint systems that allowed passengers to report mistreatment anonymously. Officers received mandatory training on bias, de-escalation, and constitutional rights. Camille never asked for credit, but her actions had made a lasting impact. Late one afternoon, she received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, from a woman she had never met, a former victim of Thompson and Green. The letter simply said, "I didn't know how to speak up, but when I saw what you did, I realized I wasn't alone. Thank you for standing up. Because of you, I finally found my voice." Camille held the letter in her hands for a long time. She had returned to work stronger, but it wasn't just her own strength she carried now. It was the strength of every person who had ever been silenced and finally saw that justice was possible. Camille folded the letter and placed it gently in her desk drawer, right beside her badge. It reminded her that justice isn't always loud. It's often quiet, personal, and fought for in small, determined steps. Her experience was proof that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks calmly in a room full of fear, demanding truth. And it showed that knowledge of your rights can be your most powerful defense when power is abused. Her story teaches us that injustice can happen anywhere, to anyone, but it also reminds us that standing up, even when it's hard, can change not just one life, but many. Camille didn't just defend herself. She opened a door for others to find their voice. If this story moved you, or made you think differently about justice, accountability, or silent courage, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Speak about it. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel so you won't miss more real stories like Camille's, where truth, resilience, and justice take center stage. Because sometimes one story can spark 1,000 more.